Unfortunately, how to trim the corners got deleted accidentally, but here's what you do. With the excess of the quilt lying all around here, so this part and the batting and everything is going to be all excess here laying around. With that laying there, you line up a large ruler, any kind of straight edge that you've got, the biggest one you've got, if you've got, hopefully you have some. And on this particular quilt design, most quilt designs are going to be geometric in nature, so you can find and make sure that they're even. But I'm lining up this 45-degree angle that's on mine at the two corners right there. And then I'm going to trim this. What I would do would be trim this, and then to trim this edge along here, get a nice 45-degree angle. See? And you do, what you do is you go around the four corners and you do that first, and then you connect then you cut off the in-between, the part that's there. You'll see that in a second. Okay, so once you've squared up the corners, then it's time to trim up the excess that's in between the two corners. So I'm just laying a nice long ruler down there, and I'm lining up this edge and this edge with the raw edge of the quilt there. I said edge a lot of times. And then it turns into a nice straight edge. Okay, so this is the point at which most quilters, many quilters, stop. They just say, I'm not going to bind this. In fact, I know of several women who make a living putting binding on quilts. But it's so simple, and I just want you to get this. Don't be afraid at this point. If you've gotten brave enough and you've done your quilting on your top, there's no reason why you can't finish it. One thing that I do suggest is that you have a walking foot or a dual feed foot, and this is, it handles multiple layers of fabric, where normally your foot is here and your feed dogs are here, and it takes the fabric back with this kind of a motion. With this, the foot hops back and pulls the fabric together, feed dogs and the foot together, so that there's no wrinkle at the end of the line. So, now we've got a whole bunch of binding, pressed in half, over my shoulder, and what you want to do is start with a tag of 8 to 10 inches. So I've got a tag there. I know where 1/4 of an inch is, and I want to stitch 1/4 of an inch around this quilt. So here we go. I've got this lined up against the edge. Folded edge is towards the center of the quilt. The raw edges are together. And I'm going to put this in the down position, and I'm just going to go to town. And then when I get to a corner, we'll be back in a sec. Okay. As I'm stitching along, I'm coming to the corner. And I'm going to take, and you need to mark where you're going to stop stitching. So I'm taking a ruler, I'm laying a 1/4 inch line parallel with that raw edge of the next side that I'm going to do. I'm just going to draw a line. Again, I'm using that friction pen, so it'll press right out, won't show. I'm going to draw a 1/4 inch line, and that's where I'm going to stop stitching. I'm going to press down, back stitch a couple of stitches, doesn't make any difference how many, just a couple. Now I'm going to orient my quilt so that the next edge is ready to go in. I'm going to take this binding strip, I'm going to flip it up so that the edge of it is straight with this raw edge that I'm going to sew next. Then I'm going to hold it in place up at the tip and fold it back down again. And what it gives me is this little flap right here. I want that little flap, and it needs to be even on both sides. The sides need to match up on these sides right here need to match up. Then I'm going to take my friction pen, and what I don't want to do is catch the fold of that fabric in there. I want them to start and stop, but have that fold be independent. I don't want to catch it. So again, I know where my 1/4 inch line is on this quilt. I'm going to put it in. I'm going to drop my needle down right in that line, in the 1/4 inch place, and then stitch around. My needle came out again. What the heck is going on? Alright, walking foot malfunction. It actually broke, which was causing my needle to come out and all kinds of queer things to happen. So now I just am back to a regular foot, which is also causing a little wrinkle, but we're going to get through it. So I've completed my fourth corner, and I'm coming down. I'm getting close to where we started. But I'm going to stop right about there and backstitch a couple just to set it. Cut my thread, and then I'm going to use, I have a large table here, so I'm going to use that as my place to demonstrate. This is how I do it. So this is longer. This is the end that we rounded the corner with. This is where we began, and that's too long. We are going to just trim this off so it fits within there. And I need to, one thing that's important, and I neglected to tell you this, but it's important, that the 45-degree angle that on your leading edge, the one you start with, needs to be long on the bottom edge and short on the top edge, so that when it's folded in half and you're stitching it on, you can't see the underside of it. So this is too long, so I need to cut it a little bit shorter. So I'm going to come in and cut it 2 inches shorter, because it is really too long. Okay, but still you want to start, it's just because I stopped in a wrong place. You do want this to be 8 to 10 inches long. Okay, so now I'm going to trim this off. And be sure, this is just really, really, really important. Be sure this is the length that's going to fit in there. Now you're going to take, it's too long still, you're going to take this, the one you went around the fourth corner with, that end of it, and you're going to open it up so that the wrong side is up and the right side is down, and you're going to pin it into place so that this outer raw edge is matching up with the raw edge of your quilt, and just pin it into place so there's no, just open like that, so there's no wrinkles or folds in it. Take this one that you started with and mark, I'm going to mark this spot where this lower angle meets up with it. I'm just going to mark it there. That is, yeah, I don't even know what to say. That's the mark of where this one ends and this one begins. But if I cut it like that, we would have a terrible mess because there would be no seam allowance. So we have to add a 1/2 inch to that. So I'm taking my small ruler with a 45-degree angle on it, and I'm lining up that line that I made and this with a 1/2 inch line, and I'm adding a 1/2 inch, okay? So I think you can see that. I added a 1/2 inch to that. Now, take your stitching out, or your pins out, and I'm going to trim off just the inside of that, because the width of that pen against the ruler adds a little bit. So I cut it off just a little bit. Now I'm going to take these two pieces, lay them so they would go just with their down like that, so there's no wrinkles in them. And I'm going to open them up and pin them together, leaving little dog ears. And I use 3 pins because this is a tiny little piece, and I don't want it to twist out, and there's a lot of weight of the quilt on it. And what we're going to do is stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. So let's go over to the machine. We're at the machine. We don't have to go over to the machine. I drop my needle down into the position, and I want to get this so there's no tension on the fabric at all. I want it to just have no reason to cause trouble. And I'm going to stitch from the point, from that little thing that I called an apex before, whatever it is. It's a little V, little notch. I'm going to stitch down here, being careful not to stitch over my pins, and I'm going to stitch right on through, ending up, I ended up right where I wanted to, right at this notch right here. Now I'm going to take this and finger press this seam open. This is where it gets magical, ladies. Finger press that open, snap it into place, and look at that. It doesn't look any different than any of the other joins that you have all the way around your quilt. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch that closed, and we'll talk about doing the final part. Okay, now, as I approach the corner, I'm making sure that this goes straight up. And I'm going to go into the seam allowance just ever a little bit, one stitch in, and I'm going to double stitch it there just to make sure that it's going to stay in place. Then I'm going to turn the quilt and give it a nice sharp miter by folding that over, and the folded edge, this edge right here, should perfectly, if you've done it right, should perfectly match up to make a nice 45-degree angle there. So I'm going to just stitch this to make that nice 45. Got a little bit of thread that I need to trim off there. I'm also going to give that 2 stitches. Then I'm going to continue on with my whip stitch just around this. Again, I'm only stitching about 1/8 of an inch. Bite, take a little bite of the backing. Be sure you're not going back through all the way to the front of the quilt. Just a little bite. And you just continue going around. The final thing is put a label on your quilt. Don't let this quilt go out without your name and the date on it. It's very important because somebody's going to care about that someday. Thanks. Okay, ladies, the mystery quilt is over. I spent about 3 hours. I got it completely bound all the way around. I love to add a binding like this, and you'll see it in just a second when I zoom out. I've zoomed in right now so you can see the pattern that I did. It's just a heart and then a loop, goes to another heart here, and so it's just hearts and loops. And I did it with a variegated thread like I said before. Let me make this go all the way, oh no, wrong way, all the way, come on, all the way out. Wait, what? No? Isn't it fun? Don't you just love technology? Why can't I make that go all the way out? Stop. So the way to get it to go all the way out is to stop the recording completely and then start back in. I wanted to show you how the binding turned out. It's kind of cute the way it chevrons kind of along like that. Gives that diagonal look. Makes it, aw man, makes it playful for a little kiddo. So that is our mystery quilt this year. I hope you enjoyed it. I sure had fun. See you next year, everybody. Bye-bye.